This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
So, we're going to talk about the University of Michigan for an extended period of time on this show, and it gladdens my heart to have the opportunity to talk about how much I hate the University of Michigan and all of their pomps and all their works and all their empty promises. Joining me to have a bash session against the Wolverines is Jonathan Keller, who is a much more neutral participant in this whole thing.
Yeah, I don't have the deep-seated animus towards the University of Michigan that you do, or our friend Hugh has, or other people like that. It's
So let me just explain. So there are two different kind of pro-life stories emanating out of the University of Michigan this week.
Yes.
And full disclosure, I mean, not as if it's something that I keep secret or anything, but I despise the University of Michigan with all my heart and with all my soul. I hate Michigan. You might think, oh, he's a Notre Dame grad, he must hate USC.
Yes.
And I do.
Yes.
But just because you're very much shaped by the football that was played while you were at school, and this sort of shapes your whole life and view on football. My mother has a very happy-go-lucky, carefree attitude about football because my mom was a student at USC, and she was at USC where they went to the Rose Bowl like 3 out of the 4 years she was there, like the teams that had Lynn Swann and Anthony Davis, not that Anthony Davis, different Anthony Davis. And she just thought the Rose Bowl was a thing you did every year. Like she didn't realize it was like, no, it means that was when USC went into its heyday.
Was that during the O.J. Simpson years by any chance?
No, I think the Juice was a little after. I think Juice was a little after her. I'd have to double check that, but I think she was a little before. Yeah, she was there when Lynn Swann was there, and he. So my 7 years at Notre Dame, none of our games against USC were ever close. We got blown out all 4 years of my undergrad because it was all the Pete Carroll teams, and then we
actually attended one of those games together. You were home from, I think.
Did we
Thanksgiving
go to
break?
Yes, we happened to both be at a Notre Dame
Coliseum?
USC game at the same time. Yes,
I was there with my father-in-law, who's a big USC alum.
Yes, that was. I remember it. It was 2006 Notre Dame USC. We were in our family was in the last row of the Coliseum, surrounded by drunk, dispossessed Los Angeles Raiders fans who had sort of glommed onto USC at the time because that was at the height of Reggie Bush and Pete Carroll and all that. Yeah. And they puked all over the place and made my little brother cry. So anyway, that was not a fun memory. Anyway, none of the 7 years I was at Notre Dame, none of our games against SC were close. I think we won twice when I was in law school and lost the other 5 times, and none of the games were particularly close. It was only against the Michigan teams that I had the utmost fury and hatred. Michigan State, for my undergrad years, we had a couple of particularly devastating losses to Michigan State. And then in law school, we had 2 successive horrible losses to Michigan in which their quarterback, Denard Robinson, ripped the heart out of my chest. He was a very mediocre college quarterback, except when he played Notre Dame. And then he literally was like, because they would always play us at the start of the year. So he would look like an absolute, he was like on the Heisman short list after running for like 200 yards and throwing for 300 yards just against Notre Dame. So all of this is a huge throat clearing. I apologize.
I know, lots of sports talk on Right to Life Radio
today. Louise, this is Right to Life Radio. All this to say I don't like Michigan. So there are 2 stories that have to do with pro-life stuff emanating out of the University of Michigan. One has to do with the University of Michigan Medical School. University of Michigan Medical School is a very good medical school. Very hard to get into. Like pretty much all medical schools, they have a ceremony at the start of the year called your white coat ceremony.
Yes. I forgot that was... I didn't realize that was also the University of Michigan. I had not connected those
also
dots.
The University of Michigan, yes. So we'll have a second pro-life story having to do with the University of Michigan. So the white coat ceremony is basically when you get your white coat as a first-year medical school student. You're starting off in your medical career. They give you a white coat. And it's a nice sort of thing. Everyone, your parents can come and someone gives a speech, and it's like, oh, here you are, this rite of passage, here's your white coat. Now, as my father points out, who's a physician, these kids haven't even had anyone throw up on their shoes yet. So they are just started medical school.
You got to get started on the snootiness early. I mean, and that white coat is really the first sign of arrogance that you can put on.
But these people have no experience of anything in anything medical whatsoever. They've just gotten accepted to medical school. My dad would say he's had more time in the chow line at the Grape Jellyfish Cafe at Valley Children's Hospital than they have had in anything medical in their lives.
Yeah.
So these are brand new people who've just been accepted to a very good medical school, a very good and very competitive medical school.
For all of the sports opprobrium that you heaped upon Michigan, they are a pretty good academic institution.
So what happened was the speaker for their white coat ceremony is a professor at the University of Michigan Medical School. She's a doctor named Dr. Kristen Collier. I had the privilege of hearing her speak once at the University of Notre Dame, which is her redeeming grace that she teaches at Michigan, but she got to speak at Notre Dame once. So she spoke at the Vita Institute at Notre Dame, which is their great annual pro-life conference. And she's awesome. She does a lot of great work with end-of-life care for patients and would actually be an awesome guest to get on Right to Life Radio someday. I feel like she's accessible. She does a lot of work with cancer patients. And basically a lot of her academic work is focused on, what makes for a good death? What makes for a happy death for the patient, for the patient's family? What is the best kind of care we can give patients? And a lot of it has to focus on stuff like, encouraging patients to actually discuss the reality of death with themselves, with their families, to prepare for death, to have closure with loved ones, to talk with loved ones, and to think about, are we going to do this third option experimental chemo with a 0.00001% chance of succeeding that is going to be extremely painful and not great, or should we legitimately withdraw extraordinary treatments and just prepare and focus more on preparation for death in the context of religion, in the context of interacting with family and friends, and obviously she's sort of more in the latter category. And now that's the focus of her academic work. She happens to be pro-life. Abortion stuff is not like the bread and butter of her academic work.
She's
or
not
her
a
teaching work.
24/7 pro-life activist.
No. She happens to be pro-life, but most of her work focuses on this other kind of stuff. A bunch of the students at University of Michigan Medical School banded together and demanded that the University of Michigan that they withdraw Dr. Collier as the speaker for this white coat ceremony. Demanded it.
Well, I mean, John, they are first-year medical students. So
yes, they've just been accepted like 5 minutes ago into medical school.
I mean, yeah, let's...
Again, this leads to my dad's comment. These people haven't even had someone throw up on their shoes yet, which my dad seems to think is the true rite of passage into the medical field, is having someone puke on you. So, well, I think his opinion on this is quite valid.
To be fair, that's kind of one of the first rites of passage as a parent, too.
That's true.
Either having a child puke on you or poop on you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Also in the legal... oh, no, that doesn't happen. So the University of Michigan Medical School, to its credit, said, no, we are not going to disinvite Dr. Collier, who's a member of our faculty. We're not going to disinvite her from speaking for this. So what happened, a bunch of these, restraining myself from calling them various derogatory names, a bunch of these students stood up during her talk and dramatically walked out of the hall.
They chose to attend.
They chose to attend.
They didn't boycott it by not showing up.
Well, because they wanted to have their photo op putting on their jackets, but they also wanted to make some grand pro-choice statement, so they walked out. Now, I'm not big on talking about cancel culture. I kind of hate the phrase, in fact.
Yes.
If you want to hear my full rant on the topic of cancel culture, you can listen to John Girardi's show. Basically, I think all cultures cancel, and the problem is not that people on the left are canceling pro-life people or conservative people. The problem is the things they are canceling, not the fact of canceling. Okay, it's they are canceling good things, not just that they are canceling. Any legitimate culture has things that are evil, things that are beyond the pale, things that are taboo that should rightly be canceled. No one's going to bat an eye if the University of Michigan Medical School had a speaker who came up and started talking about how awesome Adolf Hitler was, and like if Dr. Collier had started talking and then said, you know what, I'm going to abandon my original script. Let's talk about how awesome Hitler was.
Yeah.
Then if those students want to stand up and walk out, great, fine by them. That's totally legitimate. Highly doubt that would have ever happened.
If you had a speaker who got up there and said, we really, in our medical field, we need to get back to segregation of the races in how we treat
exactly.
people.
Yes. So there are plenty of things that are worth canceling, worth walking out on. I'm not I'm not going to make like neutral procedural arguments. However, I will say this. To a certain extent, if you're going to function in the real world, then you are, in fact, going to have to interact with people who disagree with you. All right? That is true. All right? There were plenty of people at the University of Notre Dame who were professors from whom I took classes, with whom I very strongly disagreed, including on important points of like Catholic teaching, where I could very legitimately ask the question of why are they employed by the University of Notre Dame if they don't accept Catholic teaching on X, Y, and Z. If you can't handle her, if you can't handle someone like Dr. Collier, who is, by the way, extremely smart, extremely kind, extremely intelligent, who holds views on abortion pretty much consistent with that of at least 40% of the American population.
And theoretically a higher percentage of the Catholic population in the country, since it is
and also they're in Michigan.
That's
it's not
true.
like it's not like they're in, I don't know, name a crazy. It's not like they're
not
it's not like
California.
it's San Francisco. It's not like it's
not UCSF.
It's not this isn't Berkeley.
Right.
If you can't handle being around her, then maybe you just shouldn't be a doctor, because you're going to be around, like, let me tell you something. You're going to be working with other doctors who will not express their disagreement with you as kindly and as gently as she does. There's going to be some doctor someday that'll say, you're a jerk, or you're a doofus. You're an idiot. Here's why. So that's point one. I guess this is point two. This is the thing I fear. These are students at the University of Michigan Medical School behaving like this. Not students at, Northeast Alabama State School of Doctrine. This is the University of Michigan.
Yeah.
This is a really good medical school. We have seen law students at Yale behaving in similarly petty, childish ways. I guess my fear is that if these are the people who are going to be the great decision makers and leaders in the medical field going forward, maybe there genuinely just won't be a place for a pro-life doctor 20 years down the road. I mean, if you're a graduate of the University of Michigan Medical School, you are on a track to become a medical school professor yourself.
John,
you are on the track to become a leader in the medical field.
It's tied in the U.S. News and World Report rankings. It's tied as 17 in the country for best medical school and research, and number 20 for primary care. So it's a top tier medical school.
It's a really good medical school. So I guess those are the things about this story that kind of scare me and freak me out. All right, we're going to stay at the University of Michigan and talk about Jim Harbaugh. And you're going to hear me John Girardi, Notre Dame grad, say something nice about Michigan football. Next on Right to Life Radio, a production as always of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. This is the boss. Thank you so much for listening to Right to Life Radio, the best bumper music in the greater Fresno area radio market. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to do it. Last segment, I was able to make a lot of fun of bratty University of Michigan medical students. This story, it's a good story.
It is.
And it's going to force me to say something nice about a football coach whom I despise from a football perspective. I sports hate him as much as anybody. There's no one who's more of a Michigan man than Jim Harbaugh, who was himself a Michigan quarterback. He went to Michigan. He's now the head football coach at Michigan. He's okay. I think his Michiganity has allowed him to not get fired. He finally beat Ohio State this year, so that's giving him a leg up. Anyway, and as we detailed in the last segment, I hate Michigan football with every fiber of my fiery passion. However, Jim Harbaugh is like the most pro-life guy, like pretty much the most pro-life football coach in America. He
kind of shocking. I mean, I don't know. For me, maybe I'd heard he was Catholic, but it kind of this
is not the first story about him being pro-life. But what's happened is, in the wake of Roe, he's actually been fairly forceful about his support for pro-life causes. He spoke for Plymouth Right to Life in Michigan, and he actually said very explicitly, like, yeah, if any of my players have a kid and they're not sure that they can take care of the baby, my wife and I have told them that we will take the baby. Like he's like very much like, put your money where your mouth is. And he has gotten a lot of flack from people, especially from sports media, because, all right, those of you listening, if you think that normal media is liberal, understand that sports writers are even more liberal than normal news writers.
It's kind of like, if you can't hack it, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm going to be... This is my Jerry Seinfeld anti-dentite streak coming out.
Just picking a very specific job to be really bigoted against.
But in seriousness, though, if you go and you look, one of the only examples, John, or actually I should say the reverse example makes the point.
Right.
Because the only step down from being a mediocre sports journalist is to become a frothing at the mouth, flaming liberal TV commentator. Mm-hmm. And the reason that you can prove that as the point is two words: Keith Olbermann.
Keith Olbermann.
He was a lame, horrible sportscaster because he couldn't hack it as a regular journalist. And then when he got so liberal that even he was too liberal for sports talk.
Right. Well,
he got an MSNBC show.
He got famous because he was co-hosting SportsCenter with Dan Patrick, and they were pretty good together. And then people thought, well, let's hear what he has to say on things other than sports. And then,
yikes.
Oh, wow, that's really unpleasant. Anyway, sports writers are unbelievably left-wing.
Oof.
And Harbaugh has been getting a lot of flack for his statements, but he's kind of just stood his ground. I think he... Which I find to be extremely admirable, in spite of the fact that, again, it's University of Michigan. They've got a lot of very liberal students and alumni and boosters. I'm sure they're going to see criticisms and controversy and protest over him having this position. But I think it's kind of admirable in the sense of, he's saying, yeah, I've told my players I'll adopt their baby if they have a baby and they can't support it. I'll adopt their baby. And I think a lot of people in his position would basically decide, I'm not going to touch this issue with a 10-foot pole, even if they genuinely are pro-life. I think he would say,
keep your head down. Just, yeah.
Yeah. And like you have Jamel Hill, who's going on, and who is a former ESPN columnist, who she was even too liberal for ESPN to say how horrible it is that Jim Harbaugh would say this. How dare he? But again, with Jamel Hill demonstrating that a lot of sports journalists, they're not exactly original thinkers when they try to start talking about politics, and her whole argument is, hey, Jim Harbaugh, if you don't want an abortion, don't have one. Or if you don't like abortion, don't have one. It's like, all right, yeah, thank you. That's a really original argument, Jamel.
That's right.
We've absolutely never heard it before. Anyway, so we're only talking about this just to say good for Jim Harbaugh. Kudos to Jim Harbaugh. It's the only time I'm ever going to say anything nice about a Michigan football coach, so enjoy it while it lasts. All right. When we return, we're going to dig into Proposition 1 and the controversy over what it means. What does it do? No one even supporting it can tell us what exactly Proposition 1, the pro-abortion legislative ballot initiative, no one can tell us what it means. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Proposition 1 is the leading issue relating to abortion for the November elections for any of you who are in California. It is a ballot initiative to enshrine explicitly within the California state constitution, to enshrine a right to abortion right there in the state constitution. Not in statute, not through a normal law, but in the actual state constitution itself, in our fundamental law in California. The text of this proposed amendment to our state constitution is very broad and very vague. Jonathan, you've got it pulled up right here, I believe. Could you? It's not very long.
Nope.
So, Jonathan, go ahead and read it.
I will read you the text. It would add Section 1.1 to Article 1 of the California Constitution. So basically, at the very beginning of the Constitution, the state shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions, which includes their fundamental right to choose to have an abortion and their fundamental right to choose or refuse contraceptives. This section is intended to further the constitutional right to privacy guaranteed by Section 1 and the constitutional right to not be denied equal protection guaranteed by Section 7. Nothing herein narrows or limits the right to privacy or equal protection.
Okay. So we will note that it says the state shall not deny or infringe.
Interfere with.
Interfere with. Excuse
yes.
me. So interfering with is a lower bar than denying.
Mm-hmm.
Will not deny or interfere with the right to make reproductive health choices and intimate personal decisions, including the right to choose an abortion. Not an abortion prior to fetal viability, not an abortion at any time when maternal health is threatened, which is the existing law in California. Okay, the existing law in California is that abortion is legal, completely legal, before the fetus is viable, and then only legal after viability if the mother's health is threatened. After a doctor or healthcare provider says mom's health is threatened here by this pregnancy. So only in those circumstances is abortion legal. That's existing state law on the matter. Proposition 1 is much broader and less specific. It just says the state shall not infringe. Oh, sorry, whacking my microphone in my enthusiasm here. The state shall not infringe on a woman's right to have an abortion. Not some abortions, not pre-viability abortions, not abortions when mom's health is threatened, just an abortion. One could almost say any abortion. I think grammatically it would have more or less the same sense. Now, this is the problem. I think we, on the pro-life side, look at this and think, well, that sounds like a change. That sounds like something very different from what the existing law in California is. It sounds like something that is different and broader and less specific.
John, I've been reliably informed by State Senator Tony Atkins, President Pro Tem of the Senate, that no. This is just to confirm the existing law. So, nothing will change if you pass this.
Right.
But if you don't pass this, then the world is ending and it's horrible.
Right. Well, and that's so that's the thing. This is
both extreme and redundant at the same time.
Yes. I don't think I want to say it because this is a family program, but do not release liquid waste matter down my leg and tell me it's raining, Senator Atkins. Why would you propose a constitutional amendment to change absolutely nothing? I get that maybe putting it in the state constitution gives it a little bit more protection to the right to abortion than having it be just through statute, but the right to abortion is already protected by our state constitution. Our state constitution has already been interpreted as implicitly protecting a right to abortion through the California state constitution as a right to equal protection that our ultra-liberal state Supreme Court has said, yeah, that includes a right to abortion. It includes a right to privacy. Our state Supreme Court says, yeah, that includes a right to have an abortion. So it's already protected under our Constitution, according to our state Supreme Court, that will never, ever be conservative, ever. It's already protected by our state Constitution. State law is... There's also this. She's trying to say, no, this is just codifying the existing state law. Okay, if that's so, why didn't you write it to reflect that? Because it's not like there was a rush to draft this. It's not like it's complex or difficult to just restate existing California state law in the context of this ballot initiative. Just write, the state shall not deny or infringe the right to have an abortion prior to fetal viability or at any time when the mother's health is threatened. That's all they would have to say. It's like a couple of phrases.
Yep.
It's like...
John, I just have to say, it is very weird for something that is supposed to be a centerpiece of California's Get Out the Vote effort. It is kind of clunky.
It's poorly written.
It is really poorly written. Deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions. Now, and then it says which includes, but it doesn't say only including. It says... their reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions. Okay, so what are intimate decisions? What does that mean?
Is this also defending something about, I don't know, like right to have, I don't know, adultery
I'm wondering, assisted reproductive technologies. Are you going to say, well, the state shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom? Is an intimate decision, does that mean I can choose to have a surrogate, and the state can't provide regulations on the type of surrogacy that I use?
Intimate, that's a weird adjective.
It is weird. And to put it into the Constitution,
where
you can't go correct this easily with a statutory fix. That phrase, intimate decisions, is going to be at the beginning of the California Constitution, and nobody can really define what that means.
Does it mean the intimate times? Out of sight, my man, as they said in Anchorman. So does this have to do with sex? Well, no, not really. Abortion happens after sex, but it's not... is it protecting sex things? Is it... It also then has this whole weird thing about contraception in there, which seems... highly unnecessary. No one's banning contraception or anything.
Well, and John, on top of that, it says their fundamental right to choose or refuse contraceptives. Because we all know, John, that these crazy right-wing fundamentalists, if anything, they're trying to force contraceptives down the mouths of women.
Yeah. So
it doesn't make any sense.
The whole thing is poorly written and bizarre. So for Senator Atkins to come out and say, oh, no, this is changing nothing. Well, if it's changing nothing, why the heck did you do it? I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe, frankly, that you would go through the trouble of passing through a 2/3 majority in both houses of the state legislature in the course of 2 weeks a whole amendment to the Constitution of the state of California with the idea that it's not going to actually change California law in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe that.
And John, here, let me read you actually what State Senator Atkins said in response to this.
Yeah.
This is from an article by George Skelton.
What a great name.
I know. George Skelton.
George Skelton. Okay.
In the Los Angeles Times on July 14th. He's going through and he says, the title of the column is, Would California's abortion ballot measure allow late-term abortions? Its author says no. Well, first off, George, respectfully, California law already allows for late-term abortions. They just have to be excused as
medically
necessary.
Which the definition of what is medically necessary means, do you not want this baby, more or less? And if you don't, then it's medically necessary.
But he goes on and he says, based on a simple reading, Proposition 1 would seem to push California abortion law far left by allowing pregnancy termination right up to birth. Could that be correct? No, that's a false read, according to the legislation's author and 2 law professors. The surprise. The measure on the November ballot merely cements into state constitution current law, they say. But the language sure doesn't read that way to most voters, I suspect. At least those of us who aren't lawyers. It says the state cannot restrict any abortion, period.
I mean, I am a lawyer, and it doesn't read. I think it's specifically because I'm a lawyer. It doesn't seem to read that way to me. So,
well, and here's then how Tony Atkins tries to get around this. I think, John, she knows that the idea of late-term abortions are unpalatable even to California voters.
Right.
So
it's not very popular.
She goes on to say, quote, the false narrative about, and then she uses scare quotes, the false narrative about abortions up to birth, quote unquote, are unscientific and created to politicize the conversation about abortion, she said in a statement, after the legislature passed the measure mostly along party lines. And then George Skelton says, but during floor debates in both houses, queries about late-term abortions resulted in fuzzy replies. Basically, they were kissed off, he says. So they're doing nothing to actually address the reality. I mean, Tony Atkins says, well, it's a false narrative about abortions up to birth. And the natural follow-up question to any reporter worth their salt would be, okay, so what is the line?
What is the line?
Yeah, what is the line?
When can you stop doing abortion? When must you stop doing abortions? When do people stop doing abortions?
After which point will abortions be prohibited in the state of California? And what will the consequences / penalties be for a doctor, not the woman, but even just the doctor who performs an abortion at 35, 38, 41 weeks?
Yeah, which happens.
Yep.
Like late-term abort. There are thousands of late-term abortions happen every year in America. More late-term abortions happen than gun murders happen in America every year. So what does it mean? Maybe when you come back, we are going to tell you what we think it means, because I think a natural reading of this would say that this is going to push California abortion law left, and we will talk about who actually gets to decide it. Next on Right to Life Radio. What does Proposition 1 actually mean? It's the question. Matt Walsh asks people, what is a woman? I ask people, what is Proposition 1? I ask liberals. So it says that the state cannot limit abortion. So that means that late-term abortions are legal, right? And they say, no, late-term abortions won't be made legal by this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it does, because it says no state restriction on abortion.
No, John, let me tell you. Remember, in that article I read from the LA Times, there are not one, but two law professors who are totally objective and non-biased.
Yeah, definitely not left-wing hacks
not at
who
all.
are just trying to say whatever it is that's most politically advantageous to the Democrats they support.
One of them, he says, look, I called 2 law professors who specialize in abortion regulations, and the first one says, generally speaking, constitutional language tends to be more aspirational. The language of principles and broad rights with more detailed rules written in statutes, said Loyola Law School professor Brietta Clark, an expert on healthcare law.
That really doesn't... I remembered reading that, and I thought, I just don't think that's actually how that works. Like...
Constitutional rights are never absolute. They always allow some restriction, she continues.
They are in some cases, though. A soldier can't be quartered in your house. It just means that a soldier can't be quartered in your house. It's the Third Amendment. We haven't even had any litigation about the Third Amendment because it's so clear and so absolute. You absolutely can't have a soldier quartered in your house.
And it says...
And it's like...
you shall not deny or interfere with, is what this language says.
Yeah, well, and it's also like... I can't believe I'm getting off on this, but some constitutional rights are like terms of art. They are terms of art, like the right to keep and bear arms. That phrase, the right to keep and bear arms, inherently within itself means you can have some weapons and not other weapons. It means you can have a musket, not your own cannon, or your own like 3-decker ship with cannons that you privately own.
You can't own a personal nuclear weapon.
Right. And in its modern context, it means you can own an AR-15, but you can't own, an artillery, unit, gun, whatever.
Unless you live in Texas.
Yeah, well, even that. All right. You can't own an F-16. Okay.
Right.
So, but our state laws governing the right to have abortion and the language that's used in Prop 1, those aren't terms of art. It's just saying the right to have an abortion.
Yes.
That's not like a term of art that means inherently prior to fetal viability with the exception of the health of the mother. Like if you want, and it's not like it's hard to include all that language if you want to include it. It wouldn't have even taken many words to do. So anyway, who will actually decide what this vague, open Proposition 1 language means? Who's actually going to decide?
Well, John, I have good news on that. The current Supreme Court Chief Justice for the California Supreme Court, I mean, she's at least moderately Republican. She was appointed by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
And she had a 12-year term.
Well-known pro-life hero,
yeah,
Arnold.
Yeah. I mean, look, John, what are we complaining about if there's a ostensibly a Republican at the top of the California Supreme Court?
Well, the thing is, the California Supreme Court is extremely liberal. And much like any constitutional provision, the final arbiter is the relevant Supreme Court. The final arbiter of what it means is the Supreme Court. So for the U.S. Constitution, it's the U.S. Supreme Court that's the final arbiter. For the California State Constitution, the final arbiter of what it means is the California State Supreme Court. California State Supreme Court has been packed over the years with Newsom and Brown and Schwarzenegger appointees who are not exactly known for their strict originalism. So ultimately what this text means, it's actually like people are sort of talking about it as if, well, Tony Atkins said, she's the author, and Tony Atkins said that this is not changing California abortion law at all. Well, in California, when it comes to ballot initiatives, the authorial intent actually doesn't carry that much weight within California courts. So the fact that she says that is not really like decisive for the matter. It's going to be up to the California State Supreme Court, and frankly, it's going to be up to whatever Rob Bonta's office says it should mean.
And John, the reason I bring that up, I did all that
yes, well, tell us
preamble.
about this. Yes, tell us about our illustrious.
You could even say that, even if somehow you said, well, the Supreme Court in California will somehow say this, the current Chief Justice, Tani Cantil-Sakawaye, is a moderate who's led the court since 2011. This is according to the San Francisco Chronicle, a moderate. She announced she will not seek a new term in November, and she's going to retire, which means that Gavin Newsom, if he wins re-election, which I think all of us expect him to, he will be appointing the person who is going to interpret this law for all 40 million Californians.
So Newsom will be appointing her replacement as the new Chief Justice of the California State Supreme Court.
Yep.
So ultimately, this is going to be some ultra-liberal attorney from the Attorney General's office making these arguments, and an ultra-liberal state Supreme Court interpreting it. So forgive me if I don't think they're going to interpret this in the most extreme liberal pro-abortion way humanly possible. So that's what we're up against with Prop 1. Vote no on Proposition 1. All right, as Jerry Vale sings us out with Return to Me, thank you so much. We hope you'll return to us next week. A production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. That'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We'll see you next week on Power Talk.